In 1985, Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the company he built in his garage. At 30, he lost everything that mattered. By 31, he felt like a failure. But what happened 10 years later will shock you. Apple was dying, and he was the only one who could save it. Steve Jobs was 30 years old in 1985. He had co-founded Apple in his parents' garage just 9 years earlier. Now the company was worth over $1 billion. But inside, everything was breaking. Jobs had hired John Sculley as CEO because he had experience running Pepsi. He famously asked Sculley, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Jobs thought he needed someone like him, but soon, they disagreed on everything, from product design to leadership style. Sculley wanted to focus on corporate sales. Jobs wanted to change how humans interact with technology. The board of directors had to pick a side, and they picked Sculley. On May 24, 1985, after a dramatic boardroom showdown, Jobs was stripped of all operational control. Steve Jobs, the man who started Apple, was forced out. It wasn't quiet, it was public. The Wall Street Journal ran the story. Time magazine covered it. Silicon Valley whispered about it. Everyone knew. He didn't just lose his job, he lost his identity and his purpose. The very thing he built from nothing. He later said it felt like being punched in the stomach. For the first time in his life, he had no office to go to, no meetings to attend, no products to obsess over. He thought about quitting tech completely. He even considered becoming a teacher or moving to Europe to find himself. Maybe he wasn't good enough, or maybe it was all just luck. For months, he had no plan and no direction, just shame. He spent days walking alone in Los Gatos Hills, thinking about where everything went wrong. Friends said he looked lost, defeated, nothing like the confident visionary they knew. But then, something changed inside him. Jobs asked himself a simple question. Did he still love the work? The answer was yes. The failure didn't kill that, and the public embarrassment didn't kill that. He realized something crucial. Being fired freed him from the pressure of success. He could be a beginner again, so he made a choice to start over. In 1985, he founded a new company called Next. He recruited 5 of Apple's best engineers, which made Apple sue him for $100 million. It built high-end computers for universities and researchers. The computers were beautiful, with perfect black magnesium cases that cost $650 each to manufacture. But they didn't sell. At $6,500 per computer, only universities could afford them. Next failed commercially. In 7 years, they sold only 50,000 computers total. Yet Jobs kept going. He also bought a struggling animation company called Pixar for $10 million from George Lucas, who needed cash after his divorce. It lost money every single year. Jobs poured another $50 million of his own money into it, watching his fortune shrink from $200 million to under $50 million. But Jobs believed in the team, especially in a young animator named John Lasseter who had a vision for computer-animated films. He kept funding it and kept waiting. There were moments when Jobs almost sold Pixar to Microsoft for a fraction of what he'd invested, but something told him to hold on. Then in 1995, everything shifted. Pixar released Toy Story, which became the highest-grossing movie of the year, earning $365 million worldwide. The company went public on November 29, 1995, and Jobs' stake was suddenly worth $1.2 billion. Suddenly, Jobs was worth hundreds of millions again. But the money wasn't the real win. The real win was what he learned. At Apple, he had been a tyrant, screaming at employees, demanding impossible deadlines, micromanaging every detail. He learned patience, how to trust talented people, like letting John Lasseter have complete creative control, and how to lead without controlling everything. Next failed as a product, but it taught him how to run a company the right way. The operating system they built, Next Step, was years ahead of anything else. By 1996, Apple was dying. Market share had dropped from 20% to 4%. Sales were collapsing, and the products were confusing. They had dozens of computer models with names like Performa, 6400/180 that no one understood. No one knew what Apple stood for anymore. The company was weeks away from running out of money. Michael Dell publicly said Apple should be shut down and return money to shareholders. Apple needed software, and they needed vision. They needed someone who remembered what Apple used to be. So they did something desperate. They bought Next for $429 million, and with it, they brought Steve Jobs back. At first, Jobs wasn't even the CEO. He was just an advisor. He worked for free, taking a symbolic $1 annual salary. But within months, the board realized the truth. Apple needed him in charge. On July 9th, 1997, Jobs took over. And the first thing he did? He killed almost everything. He cut 70% of Apple's products to focus on just 4 things: 2 computers for home users and 2 for professionals. That's it. He drew a simple 2x2 grid on a whiteboard and said, "This is all we need. No distractions, no confusion, just focus." He also made peace with Microsoft, Apple's longtime enemy, accepting a $150 million investment that shocked the world but saved Apple from bankruptcy. In 1998, Apple launched the iMac. It was simple, colorful, and easy to use, in translucent blue and orange plastics that made computers feel friendly, not intimidating. It sold millions. Then came the iPod in 2001, which put 1,000 songs in your pocket. The iPhone in 2007, which Jobs called 3 products in one, and the iPad in 2010. Each product didn't just succeed, it built on the one before it. Each one reached more people, created more loyalty, and made the next launch bigger. This wasn't luck, it was compounding. The iPod created iTunes users. iTunes users bought iPhones. iPhone users bought iPads. It was an ecosystem, not just products. By 2011, Apple became the most valuable company on earth. Today, it's worth over $3 trillion. That's more than the GDP of most countries. Here's the pattern we see again and again. The person who fails early doesn't always stay down. Sometimes the failure is the teacher they needed. Jobs didn't return to Apple as the same person. He came back after running Next into the ground, after learning patience at Pixar, and after spending 10 years rebuilding himself in private. He once said, "I didn't see it then, but getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me." The difference between failure and long-term success isn't talent. It's what you do in the gap, the years no one sees, and the lessons you only learn by starting over. It's the willingness to be humbled, to admit you were wrong, and to come back different. People who build generational wealth don't do it in a straight line. They lose, they restart, and they learn slowly. Then they come back stronger. They understand that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a requirement for it. That's the part that doesn't make the headlines. Jobs' story teaches us that sometimes you need to lose everything to discover who you really are. And sometimes, the company you were forced to leave needs to almost die before they realize what they lost. If you found this story valuable, subscribe. We share real failure to success journeys like this every week.